Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Cyrus Kane straightened his tie as he studied his reflection in the bedroom mirror. His movements were precise, efficient, a habit ingrained from his years as a Marine. The dark navy suit fit him perfectly, accentuating his broad shoulders and athletic frame. At 42, he maintained the discipline and strength from his military days, though now he channeled that intensity into designing luxury vehicles that commanded respect on the road, much as he did in Seattle's corporate world. That he checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. Right on schedule. "Skylar," he called out, his deep voice echoing through their modernist penthouse apartment. "The Bryson meeting is at 8:30. We should leave in 15. When no response came, Cyrus moved through their bedroom to the adjoining bathroom. The marble countertop was cluttered with Skylar's expensive makeup products, but she wasn't there. He frowned slightly. His wife had returned home after midnight again, claiming another late work event at Meridian Tech, where she served as marketing director. Fourth time this month, he found her in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while nursing a cup of coffee. She wore a crimson dress that hugged her curves, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. For a moment, he stood watching her, trying to reconcile this beautiful, distant woman with the passionate partner he'd married 6 years ago. "Good morning," he said, pouring himself coffee. Skylar glanced up, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning. Sorry, just going through some emails before heading out. More late-night emergencies at Meridian?" Cyrus asked, keeping his tone neutral despite the suspicion gnawing at him. "Just the launch preparations. Dexter wants everything perfect." She set down her phone, screen face down. "He's particular about how we position the new software line." Dexter Holt, CEO of Meridian Technologies and Skylar's boss for the past 18 months. Cyrus had met him several times at industry events, a man with slick confidence and an irritating habit of touching people's shoulders when he spoke to them. Something about him had always struck Cyrus as artificial. "I noticed you didn't eat dinner again last night," Cyrus remarked. "We ordered in at the office. The whole team was there." She checked her watch. "I need to head out early today. Strategy meeting." Cyrus nodded, though something in her explanation felt rehearsed. His instincts, the same ones that had saved his life in combat, were signaling warnings he couldn't ignore much longer. "I'll be home for dinner tonight," he said. "I thought we could talk." Skylar's eyes flickered with something annoyance. Fear? About what? About us. This distance. He gestured to the space between them. "What's happening, Skylar?" She sighed, gathering her designer purse. "Nothing's happening. We're both just busy. Success comes with sacrifices, Cyrus. Isn't that what you always say?" "Not at the expense of what matters," he countered. "I have to go," she said, already moving toward the door. "We'll talk tonight." Cyrus watched her leave, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering. He hadn't missed how she'd angled away when he stepped closer, how she'd barely met his eyes. The woman who once couldn't keep her hands off him now seemed to flinch at his proximity. The coldness between them had been growing for months. Separate bedtimes, fewer conversations. Sex had become a rare occurrence, and even then, mechanical and distant. The signs were all there, and Cyrus, a man who built his career on sharp attention to detail, had been seeing them clearly for weeks. His phone buzzed with a text from Quinn Mercer, his attorney and closest friend since college. "Court canceled my morning. Coffee at Westlake before your meeting?" Cyrus texted back an affirmative. Quinn's sharp mind might help him make sense of the growing unease in his gut. 30 minutes later, Cyrus sat across from Quinn at their usual corner table. The cafe buzzed with morning energy, but their spot offered relative privacy. Quinn stirred her coffee, shrewd eyes studying him. At 40, she remained as intimidating as when they'd first met in law school before he'd switched to design engineering. Her sleek blonde bob and tailored suit projected the image of the cutthroat attorney she was. "You look like hell," she observed. "And don't tell me it's work." Cyrus's mouth tightened. "It's Skylar. Trouble in paradise?" Quinn asked, though her tone suggested she'd been expecting this conversation. "Paradise is a bit optimistic at this point." He described the distance, the late nights, the growing coldness. Quinn listened without interruption, then asked bluntly, "You think she's cheating?" The word felt like a punch to his sternum. "I think something's not right. Trust your instincts, Cyrus. They've never led you wrong before." Quinn leaned forward. "What are you going to do about it?" "Find out the truth," he said simply. "And if the truth hurts," his expression hardened, "then I'll deal with it." Quinn nodded, recognizing the look in his eyes. It was the same expression he'd worn after returning from his final tour, calculating, unyielding. "Just remember, if this goes south, you'll want legal advice before emotional reactions. Promise me that much." "I promise," Cyrus said, though they both knew that his version of dealing with it had never been about walking away. That evening, Cyrus arrived home earlier than usual, intending to prepare dinner as a backdrop for their conversation. He just finished setting steaks to marinate when his phone buzzed with a text from Skylar. "Working late again. Don't wait up." He stared at the message, his jaw tightening. Then, with deliberate calm, he put the steaks back in the refrigerator, changed into dark casual clothes, and headed for his IT was time to know for certain. The Meridian Technologies building stood like a silver monolith against Seattle's night sky, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. Cyrus parked across the street, eyes fixed on the executive garage exit. If Skylar was truly working late, she'd emerge from there eventually. 3 hours past. Employees trickled out until the building appeared nearly empty. At 10:42 p.m., Skylar's silver Audi emerged from the garage. Cyrus started his engine, but paused when he saw she wasn't alone. A black Tesla followed close behind a car he recognized as Dexter Holt's from industry events. Both vehicles turned north. Cyrus maintained a careful distance, his military training kicking in as he executed the surveillance with precision. They drove for 20 minutes, eventually pulling into the underground parking of the Archer Grand Hotel. Not a place for late-night business meetings. Cyrus parked on the street and waited. 5 minutes later, he entered the hotel lobby, scanning for any sign of them. The answer came from a passing waiter carrying empty champagne glasses on a tray. "Penthouse service for Mr. Holt," the young man told a colleague as they passed the penthouse. Of course, Cyrus approached the reception desk with a practiced smile. "I'm supposed to meet Dexter Holt, but he's not answering his phone. Could you ring the penthouse for me?" The receptionist shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Holt left instructions not to be disturbed." "I understand. Thank you." Rather than leaving, Cyrus took the elevator to the floor below the penthouse and found the maintenance stairwell. The security measures were decent, but not designed to keep out someone with his training. Within minutes, he stood in a darkened corridor with a clear view of the penthouse door. He didn't have to wait long. The door opened, and Skylar emerged with Dexter close behind her. They didn't speak, but their body language said everything. Dexter's hand rested possessively on the small of her back, then slid lower as he pulled her against him. She turned, wrapping her arms around his neck as they kissed with an intensity Cyrus hadn't seen from her in over a year. "Same time Thursday?" Dexter asked when they finally broke apart. Skylar nodded, running her hand down his chest. "I'll make sure he thinks I'm at the conference planning meeting. He doesn't suspect." She laughed softly. "Cyrus is too busy with his precious cars to notice anything. He's married to his designs more than to me." Dexter kissed her again. "Good. Let's keep it that way until we're ready to make our move." Cyrus felt ice spread through his veins. He remained perfectly still, cataloging every word, every touch between them. Only when the elevator doors closed behind Skylar did he retreat back to the stairwell in his car. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, his breathing measured and controlled. The pain was there, savage and raw, but he refused to let it consume him. Instead, he channeled it, focused it, transformed it into something cold and purposeful. Skylar had made her choice. Now he would make his. For the next week, Cyrus maintained an outward appearance of normalcy while gathering information. He tracked their meetings, documented times and locations, and pieced together the extent of their betrayal. 6 months at least, possibly longer. The final confirmation came unexpectedly on a Sunday morning. Cyrus had risen early for a run, returning to find Skylar on the phone in their home office, the door slightly ajar. She spoke in hushed tones, unaware of his presence. I know, she was saying. It's complicated. Yes, I'm sure. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. Cyrus froze in the hallway. Of course it's yours, Dexter. Cyrus and I haven't been intimate in months. A pause. I know we need to move carefully. He has resources, connections. Another pause. I understand you have your reputation to think about. Just let me handle Cyrus my way. Once the divorce is final, we can figure out the rest. She laughed softly. Trust me, he'll give me whatever I want to avoid a scandal. His precious reputation means everything to him. Cyrus stepped back silently, processing this new information. Pregnant, with Dexter's child, planning to manipulate him in a divorce. His mind calculated with cold precision. The Thompson-Galloway Automotive Showcase was happening the following weekend. The most prestigious industry event of the year, with every major player in attendance, including Dexter Holt, whose company provided software for high-end vehicles that IT would be the perfect stage for what came next. The grand ballroom of the Seattle Convention Center glittered with wealth and influence. Cyrus moved through the crowd with deliberate ease, accepting congratulations for his newest design, a luxury electric vehicle that had already secured record pre-orders. He wore his success like armor, smiling and shaking hands while scanning the room. Skylar stood near the champagne fountain, radiant in a black evening gown that revealed smooth shoulders and caught the light with subtle sequins. She played her role perfectly, charming investors and executives alike. To anyone watching, they appear to be the power couple of Seattle's elite circle. Quinn approached, champagne in hand. I've been watching you all evening. You're planning something? Just enjoying the industry's recognition, Cyrus replied evenly. Bullshit. Quinn's voice remained low. You got that look. The one that preceded you taking apart Senator Williamson at the Transportation Committee last year. Cyrus allowed himself a small smile. Maybe I'm just savoring the moment before everything changes. Quinn's eyes narrowed. What did you find out? Everything I needed to. He nodded toward the entrance. And here comes the final player now. Dexter Holt entered the ballroom with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. Tall, with perfectly styled dark hair and a tailored tuxedo, he projected success and authority. Several executives immediately gravitated toward him. Whatever you're planning, Quinn warned, remember there are witnesses. Important ones. I'm counting on that, Cyrus replied. He watched as Dexter made his way around the room, eventually ending up predictably close to Skylar. They maintained a professional distance, but Cyrus caught the subtle glances, the momentary brush of hands during a champagne toast that it was time. Cyrus approached them during a lull in the conversation, his face a mask of practiced cordiality. Dexter, he said, extending his hand. Congratulations on Meridian's stock performance this quarter. Dexter turned, surprise flashing briefly in his eyes before his practiced smile emerged. Cyrus, good to see you. And thank you. We're particularly proud of our automotive interface division. I hear your new model incorporates some of our systems. It does. Cyrus's grip tightened imperceptibly. Quality tech for quality vehicles. It's about maintaining standards, wouldn't you say? Absolutely, Dexter agreed, oblivious to the undercurrent. Standards are everything in our business. Skylar watched them with growing unease, her fingers tightening around her champagne flute. Speaking of standards, Cyrus continued conversationally. I've always believed loyalty is the foundation of any successful relationship, business or personal. Dexter nodded, starting to extract his hand from Cyrus's grip. Well said. If you'll excuse me, I should greet the Reynolds Group. I'm not finished, Cyrus said, his voice dropping to a register that made several nearby conversations pause. He maintained his hold on Dexter's hand, twisting slightly not enough to cause a scene, but enough that Dexter couldn't easily pull away. Cyrus, Skylar said warningly, stepping closer. This isn't the place for what, Skylar? Cyrus cut her off, his gaze still fixed on Dexter. For honesty? Transparency? The values our company supposedly promote. People have begun to notice the tension, conversations dying as attention shifted toward them. Dexter forced a laugh, trying to maintain his composure. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Are you her friend? The question, so dismissive, so arrogant, was exactly what Cyrus had anticipated. In one fluid motion, he adjusted his grip, applying pressure to Dexter's wrist in a way that sent pain shooting up the man's arm without being obvious to onlookers. "No," Cyrus said clearly, ensuring his voice carried to those watching. "I'm her husband. You're the bastard who got my wife pregnant." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Skylar gasped, her face draining of color. "What the hell are you talking about?" Dexter tried to bluster, but his eyes betrayed his panic. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Cyrus replied. "The Archer Grand Hotel. Thursdays. Your penthouse. Her doctor's appointment last Saturday." He released Dexter's wrist with a slight push that caused the man to stumble back. "Should I continue? I have dates, times, recordings of your conversations about manipulating me during the divorce." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Hundreds of Seattle's most influential people stood frozen, witnessing the implosion of carefully constructed public images that Dexter's face flushed deep red, a vein pulsing at his temple. "You're insane. This is slander. It's only slander if it isn't true," Cyrus cut in. "And we both know it's true, don't we, Dexter?" He turned to Skylar, whose shock had transformed to fury. "Don't we, Skylar?" She stepped forward, her voice a venomous whisper. "You've just destroyed yourself, Cyrus. When I'm done with you in court, save your threats for someone who still cares what you think," he interrupted. "Quinn Mercer is already preparing my divorce filing. You'll be hearing from her tomorrow." With perfect timing, Quinn appeared at his side, handing her business card to a stunned Skylar. "My office opens at 8. I suggest you find representation quickly, Mrs. Kane." Dexter, recovering his composure somewhat, straightened his jacket. "This pathetic display won't change anything. You've only embarrassed yourself." Cyrus smiled thinly. "No, Dexter. I've merely introduced myself properly. You thought you knew who I was, the calm designer, the measured businessman." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But you're about to meet the man who survived 3 combat tours by ensuring his enemies regretted their choices. Thoroughly and permanently." He turned away then, nodding respectfully to the shocked faces of industry leaders as he made his way toward the exit. The weight of their stares, some horrified, others darkly approving, followed him. But Cyrus maintained his posture, his dignity. Behind him, he could hear Skylar's furious attempts at damage control, Dexter's sputtering explanations. It didn't matter. The truth was out, witnessed by everyone who mattered in their world. This was only the beginning. Outside in the cool Seattle night, Quinn caught up with him as he waited for the valet to bring his car. "That," she said, "was either the most brilliant or the most reckless thing I've ever seen you do." "It was necessary," Cyrus replied. "They'll retaliate. You know that." He nodded, watching as his sleek black Jaguar approached. "I'm counting on it." Quinn studied him. "You never do anything without a plan. What's your endgame here, Cyrus?" He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the cold determination that had defined his military career. "They want to take everything from me, Quinn. My dignity, my name, my future." The valet opened his car door, and Cyrus slipped the young man a generous tip before answering. "I'm going to show them exactly what it feels like to lose everything they value. And if that destroys you too." Cyrus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Some fires are worth burning in. As he drove away from the gala, leaving behind the wreckage of his marriage and the opening salvo of what would become a brutal war, Cyrus felt a cold clarity settle over him. The pain remained, buried deep beneath layers of determination and focus, but it no longer controlled him. Skylar and Dexter had awakened something in him. They would soon regret the part of him that had allowed him to survive when others fell. The part that never retreated, never surrendered, and never, ever forgave. The game had begun, and Cyrus Kane played to win. The morning after the gala, Cyrus sat in Quinn's office, surrounded by the understated elegance of polished mahogany and leather that reflected her practical approach to wealth. Through the windows, Seattle's skyline stood gray against rain clouds that matched his mood. Quinn placed a manila folder before him. Skylar's attorneys filed at 8:01 this morning. They didn't waste any time. Cyrus opened the folder and scanned the divorce petition. His expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened as he read the allegations. Emotional abuse, controlling behavior, financial manipulation. The document painted him as a calculating monster who had driven Skylar into another man's arms through neglect and cruelty. Creative fiction, he said, closing the folder. Though I shouldn't be surprised. It gets worse, Quinn replied, sliding another document across the desk. She's requesting full financial support for the child. Cyrus stared at the paper. She wants me to pay for Dexter's kid. More than that. She wants you to legally adopt the child post-divorce. That's absurd, Cyrus said, his voice dangerously quiet. Quinn nodded. Completely. But her attorneys are pushing a narrative about the emotional stability of the unborn baby requiring a clean transition. What's a real angle, my guess? If you adopt, you're on the hook financially for 18 years, while she and Dexter can play family without any legal or financial obligations on his part. Plus, it keeps you tethered to them. Cyrus stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the city. She always did think 3 moves ahead. So do I, Quinn countered, rising to stand beside him. And I've already started our counterfiling. But Cyrus, I need to know how far you want to take this. He turned to her, his eyes cold. All the way, even if it gets ugly? Because it will. I don't care about ugly. I care about winning. Quinn studied him before nodding. Then we need to talk strategy. Skylar's team will push for an emergency hearing to establish temporary support during the pregnancy. They'll use your public confrontation with Dexter to paint you as volatile and dangerous. Let them try, Cyrus replied. The intercom on Quinn's desk buzzed. Ms. Mercer, Mrs. Kane and her attorney are here to see you. Quinn raised an eyebrow at Cyrus, who simply nodded. Send them in, Quinn instructed. Moments later, Skylar walked in with a tall, hawk-faced man in an expensive suit. She wore a cream-colored dress that emphasized her slender figure, not yet showing any signs of pregnancy. Her face was perfectly composed, but her eyes flashed with fury when they landed on Cyrus. Mr. Kane, the man said, extending his hand. Gregory Baldwin. I represent Mrs. Kane in these unfortunate proceedings. Cyrus shook the hand briefly. Nothing unfortunate about necessary endings, Mr. Baldwin. I see, Baldwin replied, his tone suggesting he'd just confirmed something about Cyrus's character. We were hoping to discuss terms directly, given the sensitive nature of the situation. There's nothing to discuss, Quinn interjected. My client categorically rejects the false allegations in your filing and will not be coerced into accepting responsibility for a child that isn't his. Skylar stepped forward. We all know how this will play out in the press. Cyrus, designer to the stars exposed as controlling husband. Is that really what you want attached to your name? To your company's brand? Cyrus met her gaze steadily. You seem confused about who has the power here, Skylar. Everyone at that gala last night saw exactly who you are. How many clients have canceled their contracts with Meridian this morning? A flash of uncertainty crossed her face before she regained her composure. This isn't about our careers, she said. It's about doing what's right for an innocent child. A child you're using as leverage, Cyrus replied. Tell me, does Dexter know you're here, trying to make me responsible for his kid? Or is this your own special insurance policy? Baldwin cleared his throat. Mrs. Kane is simply trying to create stability during a difficult transition. No, Cyrus said flatly. She's trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage, as usual. But it won't work this time. Skylar's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. You think you're so righteous, standing there judging me. What about all the nights you stayed late at the office? The weekends at the design studio? You checked out of this marriage long before I did. The difference, Cyrus said evenly, is that I was working, not sleeping with someone else's spouse. That's enough, Quinn interrupted. Mr. Baldwin, if you have a formal settlement proposal, send it through the proper channels. This meeting is over. Just think about it, Cyrus, Skylar said as Baldwin guided her toward the door. A quiet, generous settlement now saves everyone from a very public, very messy fight. You have 48 hours before we take this to the press. After they left, Quinn turned to Cyrus. She's desperate. That threat about the press was empty. She has more to lose from public scrutiny than you do. It wasn't empty, Cyrus replied. It was calculated. Skylar doesn't make empty threats. But you're right about one thing. She is desperate. And that makes her dangerous. Quinn's expression turned serious. How well do you know Dexter Holt beyond the professional realm? Tech prodigy turned corporate tyrant. Reputation for destroying competitors. Why? Because men like that don't just accept public humiliation. They retaliate. Cyrus smiled grimly. I'm counting on it. 3 days later, Cyrus pulled into the underground garage of his condominium building and immediately noticed something wrong. The security guard who usually greeted him was absent from his station. The lights in the far corner of the garage had been disabled. He parked but remained in his car, scanning the dimly lit space. His hand moved to the glove compartment where he kept a tactical flashlight heavy enough to serve as a weapon if needed. A movement caught his eye, a figure stepping out from behind a concrete pillar. Tall, heavily muscled, with a shaved head and a jagged scar running down one cheek. The man made no attempt to hide, walking directly towards Cyrus's car with deliberate steps. Cyrus got out, flashlight in hand, and faced the approaching stranger. Nice ride, the man said, running a hand along the Jaguar's hood. Be a shame if something happened to it. Would be, Cyrus agreed mildly. Do I know you? The man smiled, revealing a gold front tooth. Name's Reed Maddox. And no, we haven't met officially. But I know all about you, Mr. Kane. Interesting. And who sent you to make my acquaintance, Reed? Reed circled the car, maintaining eye contact with Cyrus. Let's just say I'm here to deliver a message. Back off the divorce proceedings. Accept your wife's terms. Forget about Dexter Holt. Or what? Or things get unpleasant. Reed reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone, showing Cyrus a photo, a long-range shot of Cyrus jogging along his usual morning route. You're a man of habits, Mr. Kane. Predictable routes. Predictable schedule. Makes you vulnerable. Cyrus studied the photo without reaction. Is that supposed to frighten me, Reed? Just making sure we understand each other. Oh, I understand perfectly, Cyrus said, his voice deceptively calm. You're the type of man who follows people for money, takes photos, makes threats, but doesn't actually do anything significant unless the price is right. Reed's smile disappeared. You think I won't hurt you? I think, Cyrus said, stepping closer, that you don't know who you're dealing with. I spent 3 tours in combat zones neutralizing threats far more dangerous than a hired thug with a camera. This isn't a war zone, soldier boy. This is Seattle. And here, money talks. True, but do you know what else talks? Cyrus gestured toward the garage ceiling. Security cameras. The ones I had installed when I bought the penthouse. The ones currently recording this conversation. Reed glanced up involuntarily, then quickly composed himself. Cameras can have technical difficulties. So can people, Cyrus replied, his tone hardening. Tell Dexter his message is received. And here's mine. I've faced men who wanted to kill me. Men with training, with conviction, with purpose. You're just a paycheck away from changing sides. For a moment, tension crackled between them. Then Reed stepped back, tucking the phone away. We'll be seeing each other again, Kane. I look forward to it, Cyrus replied. Oh, and Reed, next time you decide to deliver a message in my garage, remember that I designed this building's security system myself. The guard isn't missing, he's watching us right now, along with the police I called when I drove in and noticed you waiting. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened, and 2 uniformed officers stepped out with a security guard at Reed's face darkened. This isn't over. No, Cyrus agreed. It's just beginning. As the police approached, Reed backed away and then turned, striding quickly toward the exit ramp. The officers moved to follow, but Cyrus held up a hand. Let him go, he told them. I have his image on camera, and I want him to deliver my message. One officer looked skeptical. You sure, Mr. Kane? Threatening behavior like this is exactly what I expected, Cyrus finished. Thank you for responding, officers, but I have everything under control. After the police left, the security guard approached Cyrus. Sir, I'm sorry about that. He showed credentials from a private security firm, said he was doing a building assessment. Not your fault, Jim, Cyrus assured him. But I'd appreciate a heads up if he or anyone else unusual shows up again. Absolutely, Mr. Kane. In his penthouse, Cyrus poured himself a glass of water and stood by the windows overlooking the city. The confrontation with Reed had confirmed his suspicions about Dexter's tactics. The man preferred intimidation over direct confrontation, hiding behind hired muscle rather than facing Cyrus himself. That IT was useful information. Every opponent had weaknesses. Dexter's included a need to maintain appearances while operating in the shadows. Cyrus picked up his phone and called Quinn. "I just had a visitor," he told her when she answered. "Dexter's sending muscle now." "Are you all right?" she asked sharply. "I'm fine, but I need you to expedite something for me. A background check on a Reed Maddox. Ex-con by the look of him. Find out everything his history with Dexter, his financials, his weak points. On it." "What are you planning, Cyrus?" He watched the city lights shimmer through a light rain. "Just identifying the players, Quinn. Just identifying the players." Over the next 2 weeks, Dexter's campaign of intimidation escalated. Cyrus's car was vandalized in a restaurant parking lot. His home mailbox was stuffed with threatening notes. Twice, he spotted Reed Maddox following him through downtown Seattle. Each incident was calculated to unnerve without crossing legal lines that would allow for police intervention. It was psychological warfare, a specialty Cyrus recognized from his military days. But Dexter had miscalculated in one crucial aspect. Such tactics only strengthened Cyrus's resolve that on a Tuesday evening, Cyrus worked late at his design studio downtown, finalizing specs for a new project. The building was mostly empty, his team having left hours earlier. He preferred these quiet hours for detailed work, when his concentration could flow uninterrupted. The studio occupied the entire top floor, with glass walls showcasing panoramic city views and an open floor plan centered around a massive digital design table. Models of his past automotive creations lined the walls, testament to years of innovation and precision. At 10:17 p.m., the security alarm pinged softly on his phone. Someone had entered the building using an unauthorized access code. Cyrus calmly saved his work and reached for the baseball bat. He kept beside his desk, an old habit from his father, who'd taught him to always have a non-lethal option for self-defense. He moved silently through the darkened studio to a position behind the entry door. Minutes later, the door eased open, and Reed Maddox stepped inside, followed by 2 other men Cyrus didn't recognize. "Nice place," one of the newcomers muttered, eyeing the prototype models. "Shame if something happened to it." Reed grunted. "Just do the job and let's go." Kane's car is still in the garage, but he could leave any time. Cyrus watched as they began to move through the studio, the newcomers pulling small canisters from their jacket spray paint. He guessed. They intended to destroy his work, his creations. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Cyrus said, stepping from the shadows. All 3 men turned sharply. Reed recovered first, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, saving us the trouble of hunting you down. Is property destruction the best Dexter could come up with?" Cyrus asked calmly. "I expected more creativity. This is just the appetizer," Reed replied. "We're here to deliver a more personal message tonight." The other 2 men spread out, creating a loose semicircle around Cyrus. Both carried blunt objects, now a wrench and what looked like a lead pipe. 3 against 1, Cyrus observed. And armed. Dexter must be getting desperate. Reed pulled on a pair of black gloves. "Desperate? Nah, just tired of you not taking the hint. Tonight, we make sure you understand that fighting Dexter Holt is bad for your health." "Before we start," Cyrus said, "I should mention that this entire conversation is being recorded, along with facial recognition that's already identified your friends here." It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Reed hesitated momentarily, then shrugged. "Doesn't matter. By the time anyone reviews that footage, you'll have had an unfortunate accident. Fell down the stairs, maybe. Hit your head." "Interesting theory," Cyrus replied. "Let's test it." The first man lunged forward with his pipe. Cyrus sidestepped smoothly, bringing the bat up to deflect the swing while simultaneously driving his knee into the attacker's midsection. The man doubled over, gasping. The second attacker came in from the right. Cyrus pivoted, using the bat to sweep the man's legs out from under him. He crashed into a drafting table, sending papers flying. Reed moved more cautiously, circling to find an opening. Not bad for a car designer, but we're just getting started. So am I, Cyrus replied, his military training fully engaged now, body responding with a muscle memory of combat. The fight that followed was brutal and efficient. Cyrus moved with precision honed from years of training, turning the confined space to his advantage. When the first attacker regained his feet and charged again, Cyrus used the man's momentum to send him crashing into a glass display case. The second man proved more skilled, landing a glancing blow to Cyrus's shoulder before receiving a strike to the knee that left him howling on the floor. Reed proved the most dangerous, quick and experienced in street fighting. They exchanged blows, knocking over furniture and sending design materials scattering across the floor. Reed managed to disarm Cyrus, sending the bat skittering away, but Cyrus countered by grabbing a heavy metal prototype and swinging it in a short arc that connected with Reed's jaw. Blood sprayed as Reed staggered back, spitting out what might have been a tooth. His eyes blazed with fury and something else, a grudging respect. "You fight pretty good for a rich boy," he growled. "And you bleed pretty good for a professional," Cyrus replied. Behind them, the elevator dinged. Reed glanced toward the sound, then back at Cyrus. "This isn't finished." "No," Cyrus agreed. "It's not." Reed gestured to his companions, who limped toward the exit. Before following them, Reed paused. "You know you won't stop, right? Holt doesn't lose. Ever. First time for everything," Cyrus replied. After they departed, Cyrus surveyed the damage to his studio. Broken glass, damaged prototypes, blood on the floor, some his, most theirs. He touched his split lip, wincing slightly. The elevator doors opened again, and his night security guard, Frank, rushed in with a drawn taser. "Mr. Kane, are you all right?" The cameras showed. "I'm fine, Frank," Cyrus assured him. "Just a disagreement with some visitors." "Should I call the police, sir?" Cyrus considered briefly, then shook his head. "No, but I do need copies of the security footage. All angles. And I'd appreciate your discretion about tonight's events." "Of course, sir." Frank hesitated. "If you don't mind me saying, you might want to get that cut looked at." Cyrus nodded. "I'll take care of it." "Thank you, Frank." After the guard left, Cyrus sat at his desk and made a phone call. "Quinn, it's me. Dexter just escalated to physical violence." "No, I'm fine. But I need you to do something for me." "Yes, it's time to push back. Hard." He ended the call and stared out at Seattle's nightscape, the city lights blurring slightly as adrenaline ebbed from his system. The pain from his injuries was secondary to the cold clarity of his purpose. Dexter had crossed a line. Now Cyrus would show him exactly what that meant. The following evening, Cyrus sat in a private booth at Valence, an exclusive restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. Classical music played softly in the background, providing both ambience and privacy for the well-heeled clientele who value discretion with their fine dining. That he checked his watch. His meeting was scheduled for 8:30 p.m., and it was now 8:27. The text had come unexpectedly that morning, an unknown number with a direct message. "Information about Dexter and Skylar you need to see. Valence. 8:30 tonight. Come alone. FH." Initials he recognized immediately. Fiona Holt, Dexter's wife. At precisely 8:30, a woman approached his table. Tall and slender, with platinum blonde hair cut in a severe bob that framed sharp cheekbones and ice-blue eyes. She wore a tailored black pantsuit that screamed money and power without trying. Cyrus stood to greet her. "Mrs. Holt, Mr. Kane." Her voice was cool, precise. "Thank you for coming. Your message was intriguing," he replied as they both sat. "Though I admit, I didn't expect to hear from you." A server approached, but Fiona waved him away with a practiced gesture. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Mr. Kane. I'm here because we share a problem." "Dexter," Cyrus said. "And your wife." She placed a small clutch purse on the table. "How much do you know about their relationship?" "Enough to end my marriage." Fiona's lips curved in what might have been called a smile, if it contained any warmth. "You know the mechanics, the affair, the pregnancy, but you don't know the scope of their betrayal." "Enlighten me," Cyrus said, watching her carefully. Fiona opened her clutch and removed a small USB drive, placing it on the table between them. 6 months of surveillance. Hotel rooms. Phone calls. Explicit conversations about their plans for both of us. Cyrus eyed the drive without reaching for it. Why would you share this with me? Because revenge is a dish best served by those who understand its proper temperature, she replied. Dexter believes he's untouchable. So does your wife. They've been planning their future together while systematically dismantling ours. And what do you want from me in exchange? Fiona leaned forward slightly. An alliance. Mutually assured destruction for them, not us. Go on. These recordings show more than just an affair, she explained. They detail how Skylar and Dexter plan to trigger the divorce, how they intend to use the pregnancy to secure your financial support, while keeping Dexter's name clear of scandal. That fits what I've already discovered, Cyrus acknowledged. But there's more, Fiona continued. Dexter has been systematically transferring Meridian Technologies' intellectual property to a shell company in preparation for a departure after the divorce finalizes. Your wife has been helping him, using her marketing position to access proprietary information. Corporate espionage, Cyrus said, understanding immediately. That would interest Meridian's board. Precisely. Fiona nudged the drive closer to him. There's something else you should know. The attack on your studio wasn't just intimidation. It was a cover. For what? Industrial theft. While Reed and his men kept you occupied, another team accessed your secure servers. They were looking for your next-generation design specifications. Cyrus felt cold anger spread through him. His designs, his creations, the products of thousands of hours of work. Did they get them? Fiona shook her head. No. Your security protocols were better than they anticipated. But they'll try again. Cyrus finally reached for the drive, pocketing it. Why are you really doing this, Fiona? Revenge doesn't seem your style. She studied him for a moment before answering. Dexter made a mistake in choosing Skylar over me. Not because of love, I have no illusions about our marriage, but because of calculation. I brought connections to Meridian that built his empire. Family ties to venture capital that funded his vision. He thinks he can discard me and keep the benefits I provided. And you intend to show him otherwise. Exactly. Her eyes glittered with cold determination. I don't just want revenge, Cyrus. I want them destroyed. Together, we can do that. Cyrus considered her offer. An alliance with Fiona Holt carried risks. She was clearly as calculating as Dexter, perhaps more so. But she also offered resources and information he couldn't easily obtain otherwise. What exactly do you propose? He asked. A coordinated campaign, she replied. Legal, financial, and social. I have the connections to ensure Dexter loses everything he values: his reputation, his company, his future. You have the moral high ground as the wronged husband and the technical expertise to protect yourself from their attacks. And the videos should be released strategically, not to the public that's too blunt an instrument. Instead, to specific individuals with the power to damage them professionally. Board members, key investors, industry leaders whose respect they need. Cyrus nodded slowly. It was elegant in its cruelty, no tabloid headlines, just the quiet destruction of carefully built professional reputations. You've clearly given this considerable thought, he observed. I've had time to plan, Fiona replied. Dexter's affair with your wife isn't his first indiscretion, but it will be his last mistake. What guarantee do I have that you won't turn these same tactics against me once Dexter and Skylar are dealt with? Fiona's expression remained impassive. None, but consider our incentives. I gain nothing by destroying you after we succeed. In fact, having a powerful ally in Seattle's business community benefits me. Self-interest is the most reliable guarantee I can offer. It was coldly logical, which Cyrus appreciated more than false promises of loyalty. One question, he said. The pregnancy. Is it real? Very, Fiona confirmed. Though Dexter has no intention of acknowledging the child publicly. That's part of their plan to secure your financial support while keeping his reputation untarnished. I see. Cyrus made his decision. I accept your proposal, Mrs. Holt, with one condition. Name it. I want Reed Maddox. Fiona raised an eyebrow. The enforcer? Why? He crossed the line, Cyrus said simply. I want him neutralized. That can be arranged, she replied. I have information that could put him back in prison for parole violations. Would that suffice? It's a start. Fiona extended her hand across the table. Then we have an agreement, Mr. Kane. Cyrus shook it, noting the firmness of her grip and the cold calculation in her eyes. Call me Cyrus. I think we're about to get to know each other very well. Fiona, she replied with a nod. And yes, I believe we are. As they finalized the details of their alliance, Cyrus felt a grim satisfaction settling in his chest. With Fiona's resources combined with his own, the path to complete retribution was taking clear shape. Skylar and Dexter had awakened something dangerous when they betrayed him, not just his anger, but his tactical mind. The part of him that had survived combat by outthinking enemies who underestimated him. Now, with an unexpected but formidable ally, he would show them exactly what it meant to face Cyrus Kane as an enemy. Not through brute force or a public scandal, but through the systematic dismantling of everything they valued. They wanted to take his dignity, his name, his future. He would take everything from them instead. Later that night, in his penthouse, Cyrus plugged the USB drive into his computer. The files were organized chronologically: videos, audio recordings, and text messages dating back 6 months. That he opened the earliest video file. It showed Dexter and Skylar in a hotel room, post-intimacy, discussing their relationship. Cyrus forced himself to watch dispassionately, focusing not on the betrayal but on the information. When are you going to tell him? Dexter asked, lounging against the headboard. Skylar, wrapped in a sheet, laughed. Tell him what? That I'm sleeping with you? That would just complicate things. I meant about the divorce. We agreed you'd file by summer. And I will, she assured him. But timing is everything. Cyrus is about to close the Parker account. That's a $40 million deal for his firm. If I wait until after, the settlement negotiations start from a much higher baseline. Dexter smiled appreciatively. Always the strategist. It's what I love about you. That and other things, she replied suggestively. Besides, Fiona hasn't signed the post-nup amendment yet. Until she does, you're vulnerable. She'll sign. She has no choice if she wants to maintain her lifestyle. Skylar moved closer to him. And once both divorces are final, we proceed as planned. The new company launches with the intellectual property we've secured from Meridian. You handle the marketing and public relations. I bring the technical expertise and investor connections. Within 2 years, we'll have everything we want, without the inconvenience of spouses who don't understand ambition, Skylar added. Cyrus closed the video, stomach churning with disgust. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the cold calculation behind it. The methodical planning to strip assets from both marriages to fund their new venture. He opened more files, watching and listening as the full extent of their scheme unfolded. The pregnancy had been unplanned, but they'd quickly incorporated it into their strategy, using it as leverage against Cyrus, while keeping Dexter's name clear of any official connection. WY3 AM. Cyrus had seen enough. He leaned back in his chair, mentally organizing what he'd learned into actionable intelligence. Dexter and Skylar weren't just planning new lives together, they were actively stealing intellectual property and corporate secrets. That changed the dynamics significantly. No longer was this merely a personal battle. It now had professional and legal implications that extended far beyond divorce proceedings. He picked up his phone and composed a text to Fiona, reviewed the files. We need to meet again. Tomorrow, my office, 7 p.m. Bring whatever you have on the corporate theft angle. Time to escalate. Her reply came seconds later. Agreed. I'll bring everything. Sleep well, Cyrus. They won't. He set the phone down and walked to the windows overlooking Seattle. The city sparkled below, oblivious to the war being waged in its corporate towers and luxury penthouses. Cyrus had entered this fight seeking personal justice. Now, he understood it was much bigger than that. Skylar and Dexter weren't just attacking his marriage, they were attacking his life's work, his company, his legacy. That made this more than revenge. It made it necessary. With Fiona's evidence and his own resources, he would ensure they lost everything: reputation, careers, futures. The humiliation would be complete and irreversible. They had made a critical error in their calculations. They had assumed Cyrus would fight like a wounded husband with emotion and rage that could be manipulated and redirected. Instead, they would face the strategist, the survivor, the man who had walked through war zones and emerged stronger. Cold, methodical, and absolutely relentless, the game had changed, and Cyrus intended to win it. Cyrus paced the length of his home office, phone pressed to his ear as Quinn updated him on the latest legal developments. Their strategy is falling apart, Quinn said, satisfaction evident in her voice. Judge Crawford denied their emergency petition for support payments during the pregnancy. On what grounds? Cyrus asked, stopping to look out at the gray Seattle skyline. The obvious ones. DNA testing isn't possible until after birth, and Skylar's own statements at the gala created reasonable doubt about paternity. The judge was particularly unimpressed with their request for you to adopt a child that isn't biologically yours. Cyrus allowed himself a small smile. How did Skylar take it? Not well. She and Baldwin tried arguing about the emotional welfare of the unborn child, but Crawford shut them down. Said something about not using children as pawns in adult conflicts. Good. What's next? Discovery phase. We've filed requests for all communications between Skylar and Dexter going back 12 months. Baldwin's fighting it, but we have grounds given the alleged timeline of the affair. Cyrus checked his watch. Keep pushing. I have another meeting in 15 minutes. Cyrus. Quinn's tone turned serious. Be careful with whatever you're planning with Fiona Holt. She's not known for sentimentality or restraint. Neither am I, Cyrus replied. Not anymore. After ending the call, Cyrus reviewed the plan one final time. For the past week, he and Fiona had been meticulously preparing their counterattack. The videos she'd provided had been edited into discrete segments, each targeting specific vulnerabilities in Dexter and Skylar's professional lives. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Cyrus opened it to find Fiona standing there, elegant as always in a tailored gray suit. Behind her stood a slim man with wire-rimmed glasses and a laptop bag. Cyrus. Fiona nodded in greeting. This is Victor Santos, the technical specialist I mentioned. Cyrus extended his hand. Mr. Santos. A pleasure, Victor replied with a slight accent. Mrs. Holt speaks highly of your strategic thinking. Come in. Cyrus led them to his dining room, where multiple laptops were arranged on the table. Everything set up as discussed. Victor opened his bag and removed several devices, including what appeared to be an advanced router. This will ensure our digital footprint is untraceable. We'll route everything through 17 separate servers across 9 countries. Fiona placed a flash drive on the table. The final selections, all categorized according to our agreed targets. Cyrus nodded. Let's begin then. For the next hour, Victor worked silently, establishing secure connections while Cyrus and Fiona finalized their target list. The board members first, Fiona said, pointing to a name on her tablet. Philip Garner is particularly self-righteous about corporate ethics. The video of Dexter discussing intellectual property theft will hit him hardest. And Elizabeth Chun, Cyrus added. She championed Skylar's promotion last year. The conversation where they mock her appearance should end that patronage immediately. Fiona's cold smile appeared. You've done your homework. I believe in thorough preparation, Cyrus replied. What about Reed Maddox? Taken care of, Fiona said. An anonymous tip to his parole officer about his recent activities has already resulted in a warrant. He'll be picked up tonight. Victor looked up from his computer. The secure channels are established. We're ready to proceed with distribution. Cyrus exchanged a look with Fiona. This was the point of no return, the moment when their revenge moved from planning to execution. Begin, Cyrus said. Victor's fingers moved across the keyboard, initiating the carefully orchestrated digital assault. Unlike a public scandal, this attack would be precise and personal videos, audio recordings, and text messages sent directly to people whose opinions mattered most to Dexter and Skylar. First batch sent, Victor announced after several minutes. Board members, key investors, and executive team leaders. What about the industry partners? Fiona asked. Schedule those for tomorrow morning, Cyrus instructed. I want the internal damage to begin first. Give them a night to realize their world is collapsing before the external pressure begins. Victor nodded and continued working. Fiona moved to stand beside Cyrus at the window. Having second thoughts? She asked quietly. None, Cyrus replied. They made their choices. Most people would hesitate before destroying lives so completely. Cyrus turned to face her. I gave everything to my marriage. My trust, my loyalty, my future. They planned to strip me of my company, my reputation, and my dignity while forcing me to financially support their betrayal. Would you hesitate? No, Fiona admitted. That's why we understand each other. Victor called from the table. Second phase complete. Client list targeted. What about the Meridian Technologies internal memo? Cyrus asked. Scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow, Victor confirmed. When the executive team has their weekly meeting. Fiona checked her phone as it buzzed with a notification. It's beginning. Arthur Weston, head of the compensation committee, just canceled his dinner with Dexter for tomorrow night. How quickly will they connect the dots? Victor asked. Dexter's smart, Fiona said. He'll realize what's happening by morning. Skylar will figure out when her calls start getting ignored. See, Cyrus nodded. That's when the real pressure begins. Not from public exposure, but from the silent judgment of everyone whose respect they need to maintain their positions. The most effective humiliation is intimate, Fiona agreed. When you know that everyone who matters has seen you at your worst. They continued their work well into the night, methodically releasing damning evidence to carefully selected recipients. No public scandal, no headlines, just the quiet destruction of two carefully constructed professional reputations. By morning, the first tremors would begin. By week's end, the earthquake would leave nothing standing. 2 days later, Cyrus sat in Quinn's office, reviewing court documents. The shift in their legal position had been dramatic. Baldwin had called that morning, suddenly eager to discuss settlement terms favorable to Cyrus. They're in free fall, Quinn said, setting a cup of coffee before him. Baldwin tried to pretend it was a change of heart, but it's obvious something major has happened. Interesting, Cyrus replied neutrally. Quinn gave him a knowing look. I don't want to know what you and Fiona Holt have been up to, do I? Probably not. Fair enough. What matters is that Skylar's team is suddenly cooperative. They're dropping all financial claims and the ridiculous adoption request. Cyrus sipped his coffee. Have I explained the change? Baldwin muttered something about changing circumstances and reassessment of priorities. Translation: your wife is in serious trouble elsewhere and doesn't have the bandwidth to fight you anymore. How unfortunate for her, Cyrus said without sympathy. Quinn studied him. I heard Meridian Technologies stock dropped 12% yesterday. Something about internal governance concerns. The market can be unpredictable. Cyrus. Quinn leaned forward, her expression serious. Whatever you've done, I hope you've covered your tracks. People like Dexter Holt don't go down without dragging others with them. He can try, Cyrus replied, but he'll find I've learned from his mistakes. Quinn's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and raised an eyebrow. Well, speak of the devil. Skylar's requesting a private meeting with you. No lawyers present. When? Today. 4 o'clock. Cyrus considered the request. Set it up. Here in your office, but you don't need to attend. Are you sure that's wise? It's necessary, Cyrus said. Some conversations need to happen face to face. At precisely 4 o'clock, Skylar entered Quinn's office. Cyrus was struck by the change in her appearance. The confident, polished woman he had known was gone, replaced by someone with shadows under her eyes and tension in every movement. She wore an expensive suit, but it seemed to hang on her frame differently, as if she'd lost weight rapidly. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she said, her voice carefully controlled as she took a seat across from him. Your request surprised me, Cyrus replied. I thought we were past direct conversations. Skylar's eyes flashed with brief anger before she composed herself. Some matters are better discussed privately. Such as? She took a deep breath. Someone has been distributing private videos and recordings to people in my professional circle. Colleagues, clients, industry partners. That sounds unfortunate, Cyrus said neutrally. Don't play games, she snapped, composure cracking. We both know you're behind this. You and that Ice Queen Fiona Holt. Cyrus leaned back in his chair. What evidence do you have of that accusation? I don't need evidence. The timing is too perfect, coming right after our court hearing. Perhaps it's simply karma, Cyrus suggested. Actions having consequences. Skylar leaned forward, desperation edging into her voice. Do you have any idea what you've done? My career is in ruins. Clients are canceling contracts. The board has called an emergency meeting to review my position. How distressing for you. This isn't just about me, she insisted. People's livelihoods depend on those contracts. Projects will be canceled. Jobs lost. Interesting, Cyrus said coldly. You didn't seem concerned about collateral damage when you and Dexter were planning to steal intellectual property and gut 2 companies. Skylar paled. How did you know about that? I know everything, Skylar. Every plan, every scheme, every conversation where you laughed about manipulating me. Silence fell between them. Skylar stared at him, calculation visibly running behind her eyes. What do you want? She finally asked. Money? Public apology? Name it. Nothing. She blinked in confusion. Everyone wants something. That's where you're wrong, Cyrus said, rising from his chair to look down at her. I want a loyal wife. A partner who respected our marriage. You couldn't provide that. So now I want nothing from you. This is about punishment, then. No, Cyrus replied. It's about consequences. You wanted to drag me down? You'll drown alone. Skylar's face hardened. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so perfect? Your obsession with control, with precision, you were married to your work long before I met Dexter. Perhaps, Cyrus acknowledged. But I never broke my vows. I never conspired to destroy you. And now, she challenged, what would you call this systematic destruction of my life? Justice. Skylar stood, her hands shaking slightly. Dexter won't let this stand. He has resources you can't imagine. Had, Cyrus corrected. Past tense. As we speak, Meridian's board is reviewing evidence of his corporate espionage. They're particularly interested in the offshore accounts where he's been funneling company resources. Her eyes widened. That's impossible. Those accounts were untraceable. Nothing is untraceable if you look hard enough. Something you and Dexter failed to understand. Skylar began pacing, her composure fully broken now. What have you done, Cyrus? I showed everyone who matters in your social sphere exactly who you are. Not the polished, ambitious marketing director. The real Skylar Kane, who calculates betrayal with spreadsheets and treats loyalty like a disposable commodity. I'll fight back, she threatened. I can make accusations too. Paint you as controlling, abusive. Try it, Cyrus cut her off. Every person who might have believed you has now heard your own voice discussing how to fabricate those exact claims. The videos make your strategy quite clear. Skylar stopped moving, the full reality of her situation finally sinking in. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. The baby is real, you know. Whatever else you believe about me. I know, Cyrus said. And unlike you and Dexter, I don't use children as pawns. The child is innocent in all this. Then why destroy its parents' futures? You chose your path, Cyrus replied simply. The consequences are yours to bear. Skylar stared at him for a long moment. You really won't stop, will you? Not until we're completely ruined. You wanted a war, Skylar. I'm simply better at fighting it than you expected. She gathered her purse with trembling hands. This isn't over. Actually, Cyrus said as she reached the door. It is. The charity auction tomorrow night? The one you've spent months organizing to secure your social position? I'd reconsider attending. Skylar froze. What have you done? Nothing yet. But I hear Patricia Winthrop has received some interesting information about the event's principal organizer. As chairwoman of the foundation, she might have concerns about association. The color drained from Skylar's face. The Winthrop Foundation auction was her crowning social achievement, the event that had solidified her place in Seattle's elite circles. You can't, she whispered. I've worked on that event for months. As you said earlier, Cyrus replied coldly. Actions have consequences. Goodbye, Skylar. After she left, Cyrus remained in Quinn's office, staring out at the Seattle skyline. The confrontation had brought no satisfaction, no closure, just a cold certainty that justice was being served. His phone buzzed with a text from Fiona. Meridian board meeting concluded. Dexter suspended pending investigation. Security escorted him out. Phase 3 ready to proceed. Cyrus typed back, proceed. The final act was now in motion. The following evening, the annual Winthrop Foundation charity auction transformed the Seattle Art Museum into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. Cyrus arrived alone, dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit. He nodded to acquaintances as he moved through the crowd, noting the subtle shifts in body language as people recognized him, the mixture of sympathy, curiosity, and respect that had replaced the pity he'd initially received after the gala confrontation. Patricia Winthrop, a steel-haired woman in her 60s who controlled one of Seattle's oldest family foundations, intercepted him near the champagne table. "Mr. Kane," she said, her voice crisp, "I wasn't certain you would attend, given the circumstances." "I believe in supporting worthy causes, Mrs. Winthrop," he replied, regardless of personal situations. She studied him with shrewd eyes, a commendable attitude. "I must say, the event seems to be proceeding well despite the last-minute organizational changes." "Changes?" Cyrus asked innocently. "Surely you heard. Your wife withdrew from the committee yesterday. Most unexpected, given her previous involvement. Though perhaps for the best, considering the rumors circulating." Cyrus maintained a neutral expression. "I make it a policy not to give credence to rumors." "Very wise," Patricia nodded. "Though in this case, I received more than rumors. Quite enlightening material, in fact." She lowered her voice. "Seattle is smaller than people realize, Mr. Kane. Actions have a way of becoming known, particularly among those who matter." "Indeed they do," Cyrus agreed. Patricia glanced across the room to where several women were engaged in hushed conversation, occasionally looking toward the entrance. "I believe your wife intended to make an appearance despite stepping down from the committee. Brave, under the circumstances." As if summoned by the comment, a stir went through the crowd near the entrance. Schuyler had arrived, wearing a burgundy gown that normally would have commanded admiration. Instead, her entrance created a wave of whispers and sidelong glances. Cyrus watched as she moved into the room, head held high despite the reception. He had to acknowledge her courage, however misplaced. She stopped to speak to a group of women who had once been her close social allies, only to have them make excuses and drift away after minimal acknowledgement. The pattern repeated throughout the room. People who had eagerly sought her attention at previous events now avoided direct engagement, offering perfunctory greetings before finding reasons to be elsewhere. Patricia observed the scene with the dispassionate interest of someone witnessing the social equivalent of a car crash. "Reputation," she said quietly to Cyrus, "is the currency of our circle. Once devalued, it's nearly impossible to restore." "Some values should be more carefully protected," Cyrus replied. "Indeed." Patricia touched his arm lightly. "I should attend to my other guests. Do enjoy the evening, Mr. Kane." Cyrus circulated through the event, careful to maintain a respectful distance from Schuyler. There was no need for direct confrontation here. The social humiliation unfolding around her was more effective than any words he could offer. Halfway through the evening, he found a quiet moment in the museum's sculpture garden. The night air was cool, but not uncomfortable, offering a respite from the tension inside. "Enjoying the show?" Fiona's voice came from behind him. Cyrus turned to find her approaching, elegant in a midnight blue gown. "I didn't know you were attending." "The Holts have supported the Winthrop Foundation for years," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Patricia would notice my absence more than Schuyler's presence." "How is our other project progressing?" Cyrus asked quietly. "Exactly as planned. Dexter received the final video compilation this afternoon, the one showing board members discussing his termination before it's officially announced." "His reaction?" Fiona smiled thinly. "Explosive from what I hear. He's been calling board members all day, making threats, demands, accusations, digging himself deeper with every conversation. And Reed Maddox, back in custody for parole violations. During processing, Authorities found evidence linking him to the attack on your studio. He's facing significant new charges. Cyrus nodded, satisfied with the progress. Any reaction from Dexter about Reed's arrest? That's the interesting part, Fiona said. According to my sources, Dexter's trying to distance himself, completely denying any connection to Reed's activities. Apparently, he told investigators that Reed was acting independently, possibly on Skylar's instructions. Throwing her under the bus, Cyrus observed. Predictable. They're turning on each other, Fiona agreed. Self-preservation instincts kicking in. It's actually rather fascinating to watch. From inside came the sound of raised voices. Cyrus and Fiona exchanged a glance before moving back toward the main event space. They arrived to find Skylar engaged in a heated conversation with another woman, the wife of Meridian CFO. Their voices had risen enough to create an uncomfortable bubble of attention around them. Completely inappropriate for you to even show your face here, the woman was saying. I have every right to attend, Skylar retorted, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. After what you and Dexter were planning, stealing company technology, using your position to access proprietary information, my husband's career could have been damaged by association. Skylar's face paled. You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly. The woman cut her off. Everyone does now. That's why no one will speak to you. You're toxic, Skylar, professionally and socially. Patricia Winthrop appeared, smoothly inserting herself between the women. Ladies, perhaps this conversation would be better continued elsewhere? We have guests trying to enjoy the event. There's nothing to continue, the CFO's wife said coldly before walking away. Patricia turned to Skylar, her voice low but carrying enough that Cyrus could hear it. Mrs. Kane, I believe it would be best if you departed early. For everyone's sake. Skylar stood frozen, humiliation washing over her face as she realized dozens of people had witnessed the exchange. Her gaze swept the room, finally landing on Cyrus and Fiona standing together near the entrance to the garden. For a moment, raw hatred flashed in her eyes. Then, without a word, she turned and walked toward the exit, people parting before her like water around a stone. Social execution, Fiona murmured. More effective than any legal punishment. And more fitting, Cyrus added. She valued her social standing above all else. One down, Fiona said. One to go. 3 days after the charity auction, Cyrus received an unexpected call from Detective Michael Rivera of the Seattle Police Department. Mr. Kane, we need to speak with you regarding an incident involving Dexter Holt. What kind of incident? Cyrus asked, setting down the design specs he'd been reviewing. Mr. Holt was assaulted last night. Badly beaten. He's currently in Harborview Medical Center. Cyrus frowned. This wasn't part of the plan. I'm sorry to hear that, Detective. But I'm not sure why you're calling me. Mr. Holt mentioned your name during his initial statement, Rivera explained. Given your public history with him, we need to establish your whereabouts last night between 10 p.m. and midnight. I was home, Cyrus said, working on design specifications for a new project. My building security can confirm I didn't leave. We'll check that, Rivera said. There's something else. Reed Maddox was released from custody yesterday afternoon. Charges dropped due to evidentiary issues. Cyrus's grip tightened on the phone. Reed was supposed to remain in custody. I see. And you suspect Reed was involved in the assault? We're exploring all possibilities, Rivera said carefully. Would you be available to come to the station later today to make a formal statement? Of course. I have nothing to hide. After ending the call, Cyrus immediately called Fiona. Reed's out, he said when she answered. And Dexter's in the hospital. Badly beaten. I just heard, she replied. This wasn't part of our arrangement, Cyrus. I didn't authorize any physical attack. Neither did I, he said firmly. Something's changed. We need to meet. My office. 1 hour. Fiona's private office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building with views of Elliott Bay. Unlike Dexter's flashy corporate headquarters, her space projected understated power. Antique furniture mixed with modern art, creating an atmosphere of timeless wealth. She sat behind a massive desk as Cyrus entered. This complicates things, she said without preamble. What happened with Reed? Cyrus asked, taking a seat across from her. He was supposed to remain in custody. My contact in the prosecutor's office says the evidence against him mysteriously disappeared from the case file. Someone with influence intervened. Dexter. Fiona shook her head. He doesn't have that kind of pull anymore. Not after the board suspended him. Then who? Before she could answer, Fiona's assistant entered. Excuse me, Mrs. Holt. There's a Reed Maddox in reception insisting on seeing you. He says it's urgent. Fiona and Cyrus exchanged a glance. Send him in, she said, and call security to stand by. Moments later, Reed Maddox strode into the office. He looked rougher than when Cyrus had last seen him. A fresh bruise darkened his jaw, and his knuckles were raw and scabbed. Well, he said, taking the sight of them together. Ain't this cozy? What do you want, Reed? Fiona asked coldly. Just thought you should know your ex-husband's not going to be doing much talking for a while. Reed's grin revealed his gold tooth. Funny how karma works. Cyrus stood slowly. You attacked Dexter. Let's just say he and I had a difference of opinion about loyalty, Reed replied. Man sends me to do his dirty work, then tries to hang me out to dry when it goes south. That deserves a response. Why come here? Fiona demanded. If you're confessing to assault, the police station is downtown. Reed laughed harshly. I'm not confessing to shit. I'm delivering a message. Dexter tried to blame me for everything. The attack on your studio, the threats, all of it. Said I was acting on my own, maybe working for you two. And? Cyrus prompted. And I explained to him, with my fists, why that was a bad idea. Reed's expression hardened. I also reminded him that I know where all his bodies are buried. Figuratively speaking. For now, Fiona leaned forward. What exactly are you saying, Mr. Maddox? I'm saying Dexter Holt isn't the mastermind he thinks he is. I've been recording our conversations for months' insurance, you know? Those recordings detail every illegal thing he asked me to do, including some stuff that would interest the SEC and the FBI. Why tell us this? Cyrus asked. Reed shrugged. Professional courtesy. You two managed to tear down what Dexter spent years building. That shows skill. I respect skill. He grinned again. Plus, I figured you'd enjoy knowing he's suffering. We're not interested in physical violence, Fiona said firmly. Your loss, Reed replied. Anyway, I'm leaving Seattle for a while. Just want to let you know Dexter won't be a problem anymore. Not after what I told him. Which was what? Cyrus pressed. That if he tries to recover professionally, legally, any way at all, I'll release everything I have to the authorities. He's done. Finished. Just like he tried to do to me. Reed turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and Kane? No hard feelings about our confrontations. Just business, you understand. After he departed, Fiona and Cyrus sat in silence for a moment. Did you arrange his release? Cyrus finally asked. No, Fiona said. Though I admit, the result is convenient. Dexter created his own worst enemy, Cyrus observed. Used Reed for dirty work, then tried to sacrifice him when things went bad. A common mistake among men like Dexter, Fiona replied. They view people as tools, forgetting that tools can cut both ways. Cyrus stood and walked to the window. I should give my statement to the police. Establish my alibi. Of course, Fiona agreed, though I doubt you'll remain a suspect for long. Not with Reed practically confessing. This isn't how I wanted it to end, Cyrus said quietly. Not with violence. The end is rarely clean, Fiona observed. But the result is the same. Dexter has lost everything. His position, his reputation, his future. Now he's lost his physical safety as well. Cyrus turned to face her. And Skylar. Last I heard, she's been asked to take indefinite leave from Meridian. No other company will touch her, not with the evidence of corporate espionage circulating. She's alone, pregnant, and unemployable in her field. Complete destruction, Cyrus murmured. As planned, Fiona confirmed. Though I admit, Reed added an unexpected exclamation point. Cyrus checked his watch. I should go. Detective Rivera is expecting me. Of course. Fiona rose to walk him out. At the door, she paused. What comes next for you, Cyrus? After all, this is truly over. He considered the question. Rebuilding. focusing on my work. Beyond that, I haven't thought that far ahead. When you do, she said carefully, remember that effective allies can become valuable partners in other contexts. Cyrus studied her face, recognizing the subtle offer being extended. I'll keep that in mind. 6 weeks later, Cyrus sat beside Quinn in courtroom 307 of the King County Courthouse. Across the aisle, Schuyler sat alone with her attorney, Baldwin. She wore a simple navy dress that couldn't quite disguise the small but visible baby bump. Judge Crawford entered, and court proceedings began with the formality that Cyrus had come to appreciate over the weeks of legal maneuvering. Today was supposed to be a routine status hearing, but Quinn had hinted that something significant might happen. Your Honor, Baldwin began, in light of recent developments, my client wishes to propose an amended settlement agreement. Judge Crawford raised an eyebrow. Proceed, Mr. Baldwin. Mrs. Kane withdraws all financial claims against Mr. Kane, including alimony and property division beyond what was established as separate property prior to the marriage. She also acknowledges that Mr. Kane has no legal or financial responsibility for her unborn child. A murmur went through the small audience in the courtroom. Cyrus kept his expression neutral, though he felt Quinn's hand briefly touch his arm in acknowledgement of this victory. That's a significant change from your previous position, Mr. Baldwin, Judge Crawford observed. May I ask what prompted this reversal? Baldwin cleared his throat uncomfortably. My client wishes to conclude these proceedings as expeditiously as possible, Your Honor. I see. The judge turned to Quinn. Ms. Mercer, what is your client's response to this proposal? Quinn stood. My client accepts these terms, Your Honor, with one addition. Mr. Kane requests that the court formally acknowledge that Mrs. Kane engaged in an extramarital affair resulting in pregnancy, and that this affair constituted the primary cause for the dissolution of the marriage. Baldwin started to object, but Schuyler placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. I accept that amendment. Judge Crawford studied her for a moment before nodding. Very well. If both parties are in agreement, I'll have my clerk prepare the final dissolution decree incorporating these terms. We can reconvene at 2 o'clock for the formal signing. As the judge rose to leave, Cyrus noticed Schuyler's gaze fixed on him. Her eyes held a mixture of defeat and smoldering resentment. The woman who had once shared his bed, his name, his life was now a stranger one whose calculated betrayal had backfired catastrophically in the hallway outside the courtroom. Quinn turned to him with a surprised smile. That was unexpected. Complete capitulation. What happened? Justice, Cyrus replied simply. There's more to it than that. Quinn pressed. Baldwin was prepared to fight tooth and nail last week. Something changed. Cyrus watched as Schuyler and Baldwin conferred in hushed tones down the hallway. Perhaps she finally accepted the inevitable. Quinn studied him. The videos that Fiona Holt provided, they were submitted as confidential evidence in our case, but they never became public record. Yet somehow, everyone who matters in Seattle seems to know exactly what they contained. People talk, Cyrus said with a slight shrug. People with access, Quinn corrected. Targeted access. Before Cyrus could respond, he noticed Schuyler approaching. Quinn stepped away discreetly, giving them privacy. Congratulations, Schuyler said, her voice tight. You've won completely. This wasn't about winning, Cyrus replied. No. What would you call systematically destroying my career, my social standing, my future? Consequences, he said simply. For actions you chose with full awareness of the potential cost. Schuyler glanced around to ensure no one could overhear them. You know about Dexter? What happened to him? I heard he's recuperating in a private facility. Recuperating, she repeated with a bitter laugh. He can barely speak. Reed Maddox shattered his jaw, broke 3 ribs, and damaged his right hand so badly he may never regain full use of it. The same hand he used to design software. I had nothing to do with that attack, Cyrus said firmly. Maybe not directly, Schuyler conceded, but you set everything in motion. You and Fiona. Reed made his own choices, just as you and Dexter did. Schuyler's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. And what about this choice? This child who had no say in any of this? For the first time, Cyrus felt a flicker of something besides cold determination. Not regret exactly, but awareness of the innocent life caught in their war. "The child deserves better than parents who use it as a weapon," he said. "I hope, for its sake, that you become someone different than the woman I've known." "How noble of you," she said sarcastically. "Dispensing wisdom after ensuring I'll struggle to provide for this baby. Dexter can't help, his assets are frozen pending multiple investigations. I can't get hired anywhere in my field. What exactly am I supposed to do? You're intelligent and resourceful, Skylar. You'll find a way that doesn't involve manipulating others." She studied him for a long moment. "You've changed. The Cyrus I married would never have been so ruthless." "The Cyrus you married trusted you," he countered. "You kill that man." Skylar's eyes glistened briefly before her expression hardened again. "We're both victims of our choices, I suppose. Goodbye, Cyrus." She turned and walked away, shoulders squared despite the weight she carried, both visible and invisible. Quinn approached as Skylar disappeared down the hallway. "Everything okay?" "It's finished," Cyrus replied. "That's all that matters." At 2 o'clock, they reconvened in the courtroom. Judge Crawford reviewed the final agreement. Both parties signed, and with a stroke of the judge's pen, the marriage of Cyrus and Skylar Kane officially ended. As Cyrus left the courthouse, he felt neither triumph nor relief, only a cold certainty that justice had been served. The betrayal that had shattered his trust would never be forgiven. Some wounds weren't meant to heal. They simply scarred over, becoming part of who you were. 3 months later, Cyrus stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the Seattle skyline glitter against the night sky. His company had just secured its largest contract to date, a complete redesign of a major automotive line that would keep his team busy for years. The professional damage Skylar and Dexter had planned for him had instead rebounded against them, leaving Cyrus stronger than before. The balcony door slid open behind him. Quinn stepped out, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. "To victory," she said, handing him one. Cyrus accepted the glass. "Is that what this is? What else would you call it?" Quinn leaned against the railing beside him. "Dexter Holt is finished. His company pushed him out. The SEC is investigating him for financial improprieties. His reputation is destroyed beyond repair." "And Skylar?" Quinn sipped her drink. "Living in an apartment in Tacoma. Working reception at a dental office, only job she could get with her name tainted in marketing circles. Had the baby last month. A boy, apparently." Cyrus nodded, absorbing the information without comment. "Does it bother you?" Quinn asked. "The total destruction? It's one thing to want justice, another to salt the earth so thoroughly." "They deserved worse," Cyrus said, his voice hard. "They plotted to destroy everything I built, to humiliate me professionally and personally. They would have taken my money, my reputation, my future. And instead, you took theirs." Quinn studied him. "Complete victory. But you don't seem satisfied." Cyrus stared out at the city. Satisfaction wasn't the goal. Justice was. "Cold comfort on quiet nights," Quinn observed. "Better than living with unpunished betrayal." They stood in silence for several minutes before Quinn spoke again. "I heard from Fiona Holt yesterday. She's relocating to New York, taking a position with an investment firm. She asked if you might be interested in expanding your design work to the East Coast." Cyrus raised an eyebrow. "Did she?" "She mentioned something about effective allies becoming valuable partners." Quinn gave him a knowing look. "That woman doesn't waste time." "She's formidable," Cyrus acknowledged. "And dangerous," Quinn added. "Don't forget that part." Cyrus swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Some dangers are worth engaging." "Just be careful," Quinn advised. "People who can help destroy your enemies can just as easily become enemies themselves." "I'll keep that in mind." After Quinn departed, Cyrus remained on the balcony, contemplating the future stretching before him. The divorce was finalized, the revenge completed. His professional standing was stronger than ever. Yet something remained unresolved, a coldness that had settled in his chest the night he discovered Skylar's betrayal. It wasn't pain anymore. The sharp edges of that had dulled with time and retribution. It was something else, something harder to define. Perhaps it was the knowledge that trust, once shattered so completely, could never be fully restored. Not with Skylar, certainly, but perhaps not with anyone. His phone buzzed with a text from Fiona. New York offer formalized today. Consider my options. Dinner when you're next to Manhattan. Cyrus thought about Quinn's warning. Fiona Holt was indeed dangerous cold, calculating and utterly ruthless when crossed. Much like himself now. Perhaps that was fitting. The man he'd been before, the one who believed in loyalty and trust, no longer existed. The man who remained understood that in this world, respect came from strength, not sentiment. He typed a response. I'll be in New York next month. Dinner would be appropriate. As he sent the message, Cyrus felt no excitement, no anticipation, just the cool assessment of strategic advantage. Fiona would be a useful ally in expanding his business eastward. Nothing more, nothing less. The night grew colder, but Cyrus didn't move inside. The chills suited him now, matched the ice that had replaced what once was warmth. He had won, completely and utterly. Skylar lived in reduced circumstances, her ambitions crushed, her social standing destroyed. Dexter had lost his company, his reputation, even his physical abilities. They had tried to take everything from him. Instead, he had taken everything from them. Justice, cold and complete. 1 year later, Skylar sat in her small apartment, watching her son sleep in his crib. The room was sparse but clean, a far cry from the luxury she had once taken for granted. On the rickety table beside her lay bills she struggled to pay on her receptionist's salary. The boy stirred, his small face so innocent, untouched by the sins and schemes of his parents. Dexter had never acknowledged him, never even seen him. After his physical recovery, he had fled to somewhere in South America, running from federal investigations and civil lawsuits. She touched the child's soft cheek, wondering what future awaited him with a mother whose name was poison in corporate circles and a father who had abandoned them both to save himself. Across town, Dexter Holt's former office had been reassigned to his replacement, a younger, hungrier executive untainted by scandal. The man who had once commanded respect with a glance now lived in exile. His empire crumbled, his legacy one of disgrace rather than innovation. Reed Maddox had disappeared after delivering his violent message, taking with him the remaining evidence of Dexter's crimes insurance against any potential retaliation in his penthouse. Cyrus Kane reviewed designs for a new project, an exclusive line of vehicles for a prestigious European manufacturer. Success had continued to follow him, his reputation enhanced rather than damaged by the scandal that had claimed his marriage. He worked late into the night, alone but undisturbed by solitude. Trust was a luxury he no longer indulged in. Control and precision remained his companions, more reliable than any human connection. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead hardened him, transforming vulnerability into impenetrable strength. He had survived, prevailed, and ensured that those who had wronged him paid the full price for their treachery. And, oh, forgiveness. No regret, just victory.